Hello, and thanks for watching another episode of ARFCOM News, your twice-weekly dose of the finest two-way propaganda. A new study funded by a group out of Geneva discovered that a shocking 70% of firearms traced in 6 Caribbean countries came from the US, implying many came through straw sales or the secondary market. Friends, I have to say I'm disappointed in the gun owner community as a whole about this. We all share responsibility for this problem. That number should be at least 99%. 70% is simply pathetic.
Those are rookie numbers in this racket.
Gun rights are human rights. You know how hard it is to get a gun in those authoritarian dumps? And the way this AP article reads, you get the impression they're offended at the very notion that any of those filthy brown pores could get their hands on a gun. It never even occurs to them to question the authoritarian policies of those police state islands, so obviously it doesn't occur to them to consider that, of course, most of the guns that can be traced come from the US. Remember, they didn't say anything about most of the guns recovered from crime scenes, just the guns that were traced. That is, the guns that could be traced. Because you normally can't trace submachine guns made in some dude's garage or commie military arms smuggled in from Turkestan.
Anybody know of any terrorist attacks coming up soon?
So the real question, if any journalists worked at the Associated Press that is why isn't that number even? Now, I can't answer that question because I'm not a journalist. I'm a propagandist.
Words have meaning.
But hey, it would be impossible for us to produce quality two-way propaganda without sponsors. So let's pay some bills. Today's video is sponsored by EOTech.
The Voodoo 3 to 9 by 32 scope. This second focal plane scope is only 6.8 inches long and is fog, water, and shock resistant. Compact, lightweight, and ideal for short to mid-range shooting. To minimize the overall length, a machine interface will adapt to the included EOTech mount or any aftermarket mini ACOG mounts. The Voodoo 3 to 9 by 32 scope is loaded with innovation, precision, and functionality to make that critical shot.
Ilhan Omar just admitted publicly she wants to register all the guns, which isn't exactly a secret, but probably not something her party is super comfortable with her bringing up right now.
So one of the things that's going to be important is to create a registry. So we know where the guns are. We can know when they go into the wrong hands, when they're stolen. And we can actually start a buyback program. I know that some of the Minnesota legislators have had that legislation, and that's something that we should be thinking about on a federal level.
Gun control just lost them an election and, well, it's probably going to lose them another one. So the last thing they want to do is remind Midwestern voters there are control freak politicians who want to put everybody on a list.
First, the government, which controls our fate.
Used to been, only gun nuts like you and me understood that there is no good reason for a government to keep lists of its citizens. But after recent world events, even normies are starting to see the dark side of government, and from there, it's an easy step to consider that the only reason the government could even have for wanting a list of people with guns is so they could come by and take them, and the only reason somebody could have for trying to take your weapons is they plan to do something they wouldn't be able to get away with if you were armed.
Where were we going to find a child to sacrifice?
Santa Fe, New Mexico has an utterly bonkers new law that uses creative interpretation of state law to declare virtually every city building as a school for purposes of banning guns. A state district judge just ruled on the case, and if you think you have a pretty good idea about whether the government would side with the government, well, would it change your mind at all to find out this is what the judge looks like? No, seriously, that's not the Karen you have to defeat after you defeat all the other Karens. Well, it might be that also, but it's also District Court Judge Kathy Ellenwood, who unsurprisingly ruled without regard to state law or to U.S. Constitution. As you gentlefolk know, the Second Amendment is not a second-class right. The government may have a compelling interest to block you from entering a place, even if it's on public property. For example, evidence lockers probably shouldn't be open to the public. But if a place is open to the public, then the government has no authority to tell you not to pray there or record video or to carry a gun. Can I get an amen? The legacy media spent a lot of time celebrating a tragedy in Californistan last weekend without bothering to mention the draconian laws of that land were ostensibly intended to prevent just such a thing. And they didn't quite get round to mentioning how virtually all mass public despawns are not the lone wolf dramatic style the press drools over, but rather gang and drug-related altercations almost exclusively perpetrated by offenders who are prohibited possessors using guns that are themselves illegal. The sort of thing rarely reported by legacy media. Another thing you are unlikely to see reported broadly in the legacy media is the fact that 2025 has set a record for the lowest number of mass past tensing incidents since 2006. And if they do bother to mention it, like the AP, you can count on an entertaining take, like this. Don't get me wrong, they could be onto something. I mean, fewer killings might indeed lead to fewer killings. And you can count on them to try to minimize it by framing it as a return to more typical levels. But in terms of policy, this is what carry rights looked like in 2006. Most states were shell issue, but only 2 states were permitless carry. 9 states were discretionary, technically, and 2 states were no issue. In reality, Hawaii and several of the other discretionary states were also no issue. Bribery was literally the only way to get a carry permit in New York City.
New York City! Get a rope.
But in the intervening years, we have made enormous progress, both in the courts and in state legislatures. Since 2006, we have had DC versus Heller, McDonald versus Chicago, and NYSERPA versus Bruin. Heller established the 2A as an individual right rather than some collectivist bullshit. McDonald incorporated the 2A, meaning it limits what state and local governments can do as well, not just the feds, and Bruin established the standard of review which must be applied to cases involving gun rights. Actually, that doesn't quite impress what a big deal Bruin was. SCOTUS drew up an entirely new standard of review for the 2A. See, prior to Bruin, there were essentially 3 standards a court could use to evaluate whether a law can exist. The lowest standard is rational basis, which is used when the court doesn't think the Constitution gets involved at all and basically gives a blank check to the government. Next is intermediate scrutiny, which is the standard that was often used for 2A cases in the past. Basically, the government just had to have a good excuse for a law that violates the Constitution. After that is strict scrutiny, which is pretty much what it sounds like. It's very difficult for the government to justify a law that violates a constitutional right under strict scrutiny. But Bruin established an even higher standard: text, tradition, and history. This is a 2-step test that first asks, is this behavior covered by the 2A? And if the answer is yes, then the government has to show that a similar law already existed around the time the founders lived. That's more or less impossible for most gun control, which is why we've seen so many control freak laws lose in court. And it's also why all 50 states are now required to be shell issue. In the same time, we've seen 29 states pass permitless carry laws, as well as relaxing prohibitions on where people can carry and the age they can carry. So that means more people are carrying guns, more people are buying guns, they're buying scarier guns with bigger magazines, and they have legal access to fun stuff like bumpy boys and binaries and FRTs and pistol braces, home-squirted Glockish frames, and a veritable garden of earthly delights. Yet not only have the predicted sanguine deluges not materialized, we have seen a substantial decline in bloodshed. But you can't expect that kind of analysis from a journalist. You'll only get it from a propagandist like me.
There you go.
Hello, friend. Do you like pews and pew-related things? Do you want to help us keep delivering you pure uncut American pew propaganda at the low, low price of $3.99? We literally couldn't pay the bills without our sponsors, so do us a solid and get yourself something nice from them. You deserve it. I love you.